The Obsidian Rift War Academy hung in the narrow calm between two dying orange stars, which was either beautiful design or a very bad decision made by people who thought danger looked impressive. The station had been built almost 200 years earlier by the United Defense Pact, a polished name for what was really a group of alien governments that had finally decided killing each other was less useful than killing the same enemies together. The Academy trained commanders, strategists, and elite fighters from 49 different species. Every one of them believed their own race had been shaped by evolution into the perfect warrior. They were all wrong, of course, but nobody in charge had ever been interested in checking that idea too closely. Officially, the Academy ran on merit. That was the word printed in every recruitment message, every speech, every proud statement from the command staff. Merit. Earn your place. Prove your worth. Rise by skill alone. The truth was much uglier. Merit, as the Academy measured it, mostly meant fitting into standards created by species who had founded the Pact long ago. Species that had built the rules around their own bodies, their own instincts, their own way of fighting. If your people happened to be large, armored, aggressive, or naturally suited for direct combat, then congratulations, the system already liked you. If not, there was always supply management, data handling, or some quiet corner where nobody important had to watch you fail. Humans had only been allowed into the Academy 6 years earlier, soon after Earth joined the Pact. Historians called it a successful diplomatic expansion after first contact. What actually happened was that a human colony ship had made a navigation mistake, dropped out of transit in the middle of the Kareth battle formation, and somehow managed not to get blown into dust in the first 10 seconds. The Pact had found that deeply concerning. They had also found it strangely impressive. After months of debate, Earth had been granted provisional membership. That came with trade access, military observation rights, and just enough political recognition to be useful. It did not come with trust. It definitely did not come with respect to the Academy. There were just 46 humans among nearly 9,000 cadets. Those 46 were spread across different units, departments, and dorm blocks in a way that was, according to the administration, purely organizational and in no way an effort to keep them separated. Nobody believed that, especially the humans. They were given the same tests as everyone else, the same drills, the same grading system, the same chance to prove themselves. They were also expected by nearly everyone to fail. Instructor Kaler stood at the front of Combat Assessment Hall 7. His two upper arms folded while his lower set moved across a holographic display. He was Varkesh, a species from a high-pressure world where most predators hunted in packs, and almost everything alive had developed claws, venom, armor, or all three. The Varkesh had survived by being fast, brutal, and relentlessly cooperative. They made outstanding battlefield officers and deeply unpleasant dinner guests. Today's evaluation, Kaler said, his voice carrying the rough, layered tone of a species with dual vocal membranes, will focus on close-range combat performance. You will demonstrate the techniques covered during the last 6 weeks. This assessment counts for 30% of your final tactical readiness score. Around 60 cadets sat in the raised seats circling the arena below. The fighting floor was a perfect ring, about 30 meters across, lined with impact-absorbent plating and wrapped in shield emitters powerful enough to stop almost any training accident short of complete disaster. Medical systems were built into the walls, the floor, even the viewing rails. The Academy cared very much about cadet safety, not because it valued young life in some noble way, because dead cadets were bad for public image. Combat pairs have been selected by mass category and experience level. Kaler continued as names appeared in glowing lines above the arena. Each cadet will face an opponent of comparable capability. In the third row, Elena Reyes sat still and kept her face neutral. Inside, she almost laughed, comparable capability. That was Academy language for something very different. It usually meant they had found the biggest possible mismatch they could justify on paper, then wrapped it in official wording so nobody had to admit what was happening. Elena was, according to the Academy file, 5'7", 138 pounds from a standard gravity world, with no natural armor, no enhanced muscle density, no claws, no toxin sacs, no extra limbs. and no useful biological gifts that other species considered proper military qualities that on paper she looked painfully average that on paper she looked weak. What the file did not say, because Elena had gone a great effort to keep it out, was that before the Pact had ever heard of Earth, she had spent 9 years moving through conflicts across half the planet. Some in uniform, some very much not. She had been recruited young by one of those programs governments deny exist, then trained by people who believed survival mattered more than rules and victory mattered more than comfort. She had learned from soldiers, hunters, special operators, and old instructors who treated combat less like sport and more like mathematics with blood in it. She had become very hard to kill. Reyes. Kaler's voice cut through her thoughts. You will be evaluated against Vorik. The room changed, not loudly, not all at once. But there was a shift in the air, the kind that happens when a crowd senses it is about to be entertained. Elena looked up at the roster. Then she found the name beside hers. And for one short second, something cold settled low in her stomach. Vorik was Dreethy. That meant he stood nearly 8 feet tall, weighed well over 400 pounds, and carried a body built like someone had taken a tank and taught it how to hate. The Dreethy had evolved on a world with crushing gravity, constant tectonic violence, and a biosphere so hostile that fragile species simply never made it past the first few million years. They had survived by becoming dense, strong, thick-boned, and aggressive enough to solve most problems by smashing through them. Their outer plating could stop blades. Their muscle fibers were layered like industrial cable. Their pain tolerance bordered on ridiculous. They were, by almost every standard the Pact admired, ideal soldiers. Vorik rose from his seat near the front. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who had never had to doubt the outcome of a fight. Light from the arena struck the dark ridges of his armored skin and reflected in dull metallic bands. He was the highest-ranked close combat cadet in the cohort, undefeated in training, frequently praised, frequently feared, known for putting opponents in recovery units with injuries that took days to fully heal, even with advanced treatment. That he was also, Elena thought, the kind of person who had spent his whole life being told he was superior and had decided to treat that as scientific fact. The human? Vorik said, his deep voice carrying across the chamber with no effort at all. Instructor, this pairing is clearly an error. A few cadets laughed. Kaler did not. But he also did not correct the tone. Your rank is based on previous exercises, the instructor said. Cadet Reyes has not yet been fully assessed under live, close combat pressure. This match will provide that assessment, which, translated out of academy language, meant, let's see the human get broken in public and use that as evidence she does not belong here. Vorik looked down toward Elena with open disbelief. I am first-ranked, he said. She is 42nd. This is not comparable capability. Elena stood, calm and quiet, and gathered the training wraps from beside her seat. All around her, personal betting screens lit up. She could see the odds even from the aisle, 50 to 1 that she would last 1 minute, 100 to 1 that she would land a clean strike, 300 to 1 that she would somehow win. Someone in the back was about to lose a lot of money. Vorik was still talking. The human species should not be in military training, he said. They are structurally weak, slow by Pact standards, soft tissue dependent, easily injured. Their homeworld is moderate. Their bodies are unimpressive. They possess no obvious combat adaptation. Some cadets nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked thrilled. Elena reached the stairs leading down into the arena, then stopped just long enough to look back at him. Are you finished? She asked. The chamber went quiet again. Vorik's heavy jaw tightened. The ridges along his neck darkened, a Dreethy sign of rising aggression. You should withdraw, he said. Save yourself embarrassment. Save yourself injury. I will not reduce my effort because you are lesser. Good, Elena said. Then she continued down the stairs. The arena floor felt firm under her boots, engineered to absorb force while still giving enough grip for fast movement. She walked toward the center at an easy pace, rolling out her shoulders, loosening her wrists, adjusting her breathing. Her uniform was standard academy issue, reinforced fabric, motion flex joints, built-in sensors, and enough hidden protective mesh to keep training accidents from turning into funerals. Across the ring, Vorik descended with the quiet force of something very heavy that had never needed to move carefully. Each step carried through the floor. Each movement said the same thing. Look at the size difference. Look at the power gap. Look at what is about to happen. Elena looked, and she calculated. Mass, a little over 400 pounds, maybe more. Height advantage, roughly 2 feet. Reach advantage, serious. Center of balance, high. Movement style, direct pressure, confidence-based, forward heavy. Armor density, strongest on chest, shoulders, outer limbs, joints, maybe limited. Flexibility, almost certainly less than it should be. Weak points, not visible yet, but everyone had them. Standard rules apply, Kaler announced from above. Match continues until submission, incapacitation, or instructor stop. Medical override will activate if life-threatening damage is detected. Arena shields are now active. A low hum filled the edges of the chamber as the force field rose around them. Then Kaler paused. The IT was a small pause, but Elena heard everything inside it. The doubt, the politics, the desire to look fair without actually being fair. Due to the significant physical difference between the combatants, he said at last, Cadet Vorik will be restricted to 50% power output. The room exploded with reaction. Vorik's head snapped upward. That is insulting. It is precautionary, Kaler replied. This is an evaluation, not an execution. The line got some laughter, not from Elena. She knew exactly what 50% meant. It meant almost nothing. Half of Vorik's strength was still more than enough to crack ribs, dislocate joints, or put her on the ground hard enough to end the match. The limit was for appearances a safe-looking way to stage what everyone thought would be a controlled beating. Vorik gave a harsh, contempt-filled breath. It changes nothing, he said. I will defeat her easily. Elena said nothing. That bothered him more than if she had answered. Combatants ready? Kaler asked. Elena settled into a loose, neutral stance, weight centered, hands relaxed. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. She looked exactly how they expected her to look, small, exposed, and badly outmatched. That was useful. Ready, Vorik said. Elena lifted her eyes to him. Ready. Kaler's lower hand cut through the air. Begin. Vorik attacked, at once. Of course he did. Patience was for people who respected risk, and Vorik clearly did not. He crossed the distance in 2 heavy steps, right arm driving forward in a crushing straight strike aimed at her head. If it landed clean, she would wake up in medical. It did not land. Elena moved sideways, just enough. The fist passed by her face, close enough to shift the air against her cheek. Vorik's momentum carried through the line of attack, and Elena marked the overcommitment instantly. Too much shoulder, too much confidence in first impact. Rear foot planted hard. Recovery line slightly wide. Useful, that he turned faster than his size suggested he should, following with a second attack almost immediately. High backhand, then low sweeping leg. Trying to catch her as she adjusted. Elena ducked the first and cleared the second with a quick hop, landing light and already moving back out of range. Laughter rose from the stands. The human was running. The human was surviving, barely. The human was only delaying the obvious. Vorik advanced again, pressing hard, and Elena led him. She blocked when necessary, slipped what she could, gave ground when it bought her information. That was the important part. Not winning yet. Learning. His combinations had structure, highline pressure into body crush. Left feint into right commitment. Heavy step before rotational strikes. Predictable load-bearing patterns through the hips. Well trained, very powerful, technically clean. Also familiar why the second minute, Elena had not thrown a single real attack. Everyone watching, it looked bad. She was backing up, defending, avoiding damage, try to stay alive against someone clearly better than her in every visible way. Even Kaler seemed to be watching with the controlled expression of someone preparing to record a predictable result. Vorik noticed the crowd's mood shifting in his favor. That was when he made the mistake. He began performing. His movements got bigger. His attacks got louder. Each near miss was no longer just an attempt to finish the fight. It became a message to the audience. Look how close I am. Look how helpless she is. Look how complete this victory will be. Is this human combat? He called as he drove another crushing strike toward her shoulder. Retreat and panic. Elena slipped outside the blow and gave him nothing. In O anger, in O answered, in O reaction. Inside her head, she was counting, timing between combinations, breathing rhythm, weight transfer, reaction to missed strikes, recovery speed after extension, target preference, guard bias. That he was not just fighting. He was telling her exactly who he was, and he still thought he was the one in control. 3 minutes in, Vorik's breathing changed, not by much, not enough for anyone in the stands to notice. But Elena noticed. The rise and fall of his chest plating was slightly sharper now. The pause between inhale and movement had shortened. His strikes were still fast, still heavy, still dangerous enough to end everything if one landed right, but a tiny edge was gone. Maybe 2%, maybe less. That was enough. Everybody paid a price for effort. Didn't matter whether it was flesh, armor, crystal, muscle, or something stranger. If it moved, it tired. If it fought, it gave information. If it believed itself invincible, it always gave more. Vorik kept pressing that. He came in with a high strike, pivoted into a body-level smash, then followed with a broad hook meant to hurt her toward the ring edge. Elena retreated just enough to make the sequence miss, but not enough to break the pattern. She wanted him comfortable. She wanted him certain. She wanted him believing that every second of this fight was proving exactly what he already thought. The crowd was getting restless, and first they had enjoyed the mismatch. Watching a weaker opponent survive a little longer than expected had its own entertainment value. But that novelty was fading. Some cadets had stopped laughing and started checking their betting screens again. Others were leaning forward now, confused by a simple fact they did not know how to explain. The human was still standing. Vorik seemed to feel the same irritation building inside himself. His attacks became more aggressive, less measured, less disciplined. He stopped probing and started trying to end it. That was the second mistake. He stepped in hard with his right side, shoulder turning before the strike even launched. Elena saw the setup instantly. It was the same power shot he had been trying to create all match, the one he clearly trusted more than the others. Heavy commitment, full body transfer, designed to crush through a guard instead of working around it. That he believed in force. He believed force solved everything. That he believed she would keep retreating. This time, Elena did not. She moved forward, not back, not sideways. Forward. She slipped inside the path of the strike so fast that for a fraction of a second Vorik's expression actually changed. It was small but real. Surprise. Not because she had moved quickly, but because she had moved toward danger instead of away from it. Her fist drove into the inner seam where the armor plates of his left torso joined beneath the shoulder. Not with brute force. That would have been pointless. With precision. A short impact. Sharp. Timed exactly as his weight shifted and his structure tightened to support the main strike. The hit did not crack anything. It did not look dramatic. It barely looked important, but it sent a violent disruption through the layered nerve channel beneath the plate. Seemed. Vorik's left arm spasmed. Just for a second. That second was enough. Before he could process what had happened, Elena pivoted low and drove a second strike into the outside of his right knee joint. Again, not hard, but exact. Same principle. Attack the structure when it is under load. Disturb the alignment. Make the body fight itself. His leg buckled. Not fully, but enough. The room went silent. It happened all at once, like someone had reached up and cut the sound. No more laughter, and no more calling out, and no more easy confidence. Vorik gave a rough snarl and swung at her with pure reflex, anger replacing control. The strike was fast, wild but fast. Elena had already moved. She rotated around the line of attack, staying close now, too close for his size to help him. Big fighters love space. Space let them build force. Space let them use reach. Space let them turn advantage into certainty. Elena took space away. Her third strike hit behind the right elbow. Her fourth touched the base of the neck where armored ridges thinned to allow rotation. Fifth lower ribs. 6th, inner hip joint. Still not hard, still not flashy, just correct. Vorik roared, more from confusion now than pain. He swung again, broader this time, trying to clear the space around him and reset the fight. Elena slipped under it and stepped around to his weak side. The audience could not fully understand what they were seeing yet. They only knew something had changed. The giant was no longer controlling the exchange. The human was no longer surviving. The rhythm belonged to someone else now. Vorik charged. That was the third mistake, and the worst one to IT was no longer a tactical decision. It was pride with momentum behind it. He came straight at her with both arms ready, abandoning the smaller technical patterns he had used earlier. He wanted impact. He wanted to grab her, crush her, hurl her down, remind the room that physics still mattered. Physics did matter. Elena had never forgotten that. That was why she worked with it instead of against it. She gave him one half step of retreat, just enough to make him commit harder, then cut off line and hammered the side of his planted leg at the exact instant his upper body drove forward. His own mass did the rest. For a huge opponent, balance was never just about standing upright. It was about where the body believed its power was going. Interrupt that belief, and everything above it became unstable. Vorik staggered, a visible stagger. Gasps rippled through the chamber. He recovered, but slower this time, and Elena saw it clearly now. The shock had finally reached him. Not physical shock, mental shock. The kind that arrives when reality refuses to obey ego. He started. Elena struck the side of his jaw hinge before the sentence finished. Again, not enough to break. Enough to scramble his next movement. He lashed out with his left arm, but the earlier disruption had not fully cleared. The timing was off. The angle was worse. Elena ducked under it, pivoted behind him, and drove a compact hit into the back joint of his supporting knee. Vorik dropped to one side for an instant, catching himself with brute strength alone. Brute strength was all that kept him upright now. The problem with that was simple. Brute strength tires. Fight back, one cadet shouted from the stands. Another voice answered immediately, low and stunned. He is. That was when panic started spreading through the audience, though most of them would never have called it that. They would call it disbelief, confusion, reassessment. But panic was closer because if this could happen, if a human with no armor, no claws, no extra mass, no built-in weapons, no obvious battlefield gifts could systematically take apart the strongest close combat cadet in the cohort, then a lot of comfortable beliefs were no longer safe. Vorik attacked with a roar, throwing power over technique now. His fists crashed through empty air as Elena moved around him in tight circles, every step measured, every breath steady. To the untrained eye, it might have looked graceful that IT was not grace, that IT was work, constant calculation, angle, timing, distance, pressure, exit path, reentry point. She was reading him faster than he could update himself. That was the difference. Not strength, not speed, processing, adaptation, decision under stress. Humans have been doing that for a very long time. They had never been the strongest animals on Earth. Never the fastest, never the best armed. Plenty of things could outrun them, overpower them, tear them apart. So humans had learned another way. They learned to watch, to endure, to remember, to test, to adjust. They learned that if direct force failed, then patience mattered. If patience failed, then trickery mattered. If trickery failed, then stubbornness mattered. And if all else failed, then you stood back up and tried again until something worked or you died. Elena had built her life on that lesson. Vorik had built his on the opposite one, to win because you should, win because you are better, win because the outcome is obvious. That worked right up until it didn't. 4 minutes. His breathing was heavier now. The dark layered armor along his chest moved with visible effort. Fine stress lines were beginning to show at the edges of 2 upper plates where her earlier strikes had disrupted the support under them. Not damage worth medical alarm. Not yet. But strain, accumulation, cost. His speed had dropped more now, 0.10%, maybe a little more. Enough to be hunted. Elena stepped in with a feint toward the face, not to land, but to force the guard she knew he would choose. He responded exactly as expected. Right arm rising, torso turning, weight falling back onto the damaged leg for support. There. She cut low and drove a sharp palm, striking to the center line, seemed just above the hip that Vorik's whole body jolted. His stance broke. He tried to recover with raw force, but Elena was already gone, circling behind him and striking the same shoulder seam she had tagged earlier. This time the arm did not spasm. It dipped. Only an inch, but an inch in combat might as well be a door opening. The room held its breath. Vorik turned with an enraged backhand that would have crushed bone if it landed clean. Elena bent under it, stepped in, and hit him twice in the torso, once at the neck base, once at the floating seam beneath the lower plate. Short, efficient, mercilessly placed, he stumbled backward. Actually stumbled. The betting screens in the audience went crazy. Odds vanished. Numbers updated too fast to read. Nobody was laughing now. Nobody. Kaler had not moved from his place above the arena, but Elena could feel his attention like pressure. He had expected a demonstration of hierarchy, a clean lesson about the limits of human combat viability. Instead, he was watching his best cadet get dismantled one pattern at a time by someone he had not considered important enough to study. Vorik finally did what overconfident fighters always do. When certainty dies, he got angry enough to become stupid. With a bellow that shook the shield walls, he launched forward for a full-body rush, both arms opening to trap her, crush her, and drive her straight into the arena floor. It was the kind of move that worked wonderfully against opponents who panicked. Elena did not panic. She saw the line, saw the speed, saw the angle of approach, saw the opening it created, and for the first time in a match, she committed fully. Vorik came in like a falling wall, all mass, all force. No hesitation left at everyone watching. It looked final. The kind of attack that ended fights, not continued them. If he caught her clean, it would be over in an instant. No recovery. No second chance. Just impact and then silence. Elena didn't move away. That was the part nobody understood. She moved into it. Not blindly. Not recklessly. Precisely at the last possible moment, she stepped off the center line and drove forward at an angle that cut across his path instead of retreating from it. His arm swept past her, closing on empty space, while his own momentum carried him deeper than he intended. For a fraction of a second, Vorik had nothing under control. That was all she needed. Her shoulder slammed into the center of his chest plating. Not hard enough to damage it, but timed exactly as his balance shifted forward and down. At the same instant, her leg hooked behind his weakened support knee and pulled. Force met imbalance. Mass met misalignment. Physics made the decision. Vorik went down. Not slowly. Not gracefully. 400 pounds of armored Drethi slammed into the arena floor with a deep, echoing impact that rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. The entire room froze for a moment. Nobody reacted at all, because what they had just seen didn't match anything they believed about strength, about hierarchy, about how combat was supposed to work. Vorik, the top-ranked fighter, was on his back. The human had put him there. Before he could recover, Elena moved. She didn't celebrate, didn't pause, didn't even look at the audience. The fight wasn't over, and she knew better than to assume it was. She closed the distance instantly, stepping over his arm, dropping her weight across his upper torso, one knee pinning his shoulder line, the other stabilizing her base, her left arm wrapped around his neck. Not to choke, that wouldn't work on his physiology, but forced his posture, limited his rotation, controlled his upper body enough to slow his attempts to rise. Her right hand found a specific point along the inner edge of his chest plate. She had felt it earlier, a subtle variation in density, a stress concentration where the armor thinned just enough to allow movement. Every structure had one. You just had to find it. Her fingers pressed into that point. Not hard. Not yet, but with intent. Vorik reacted immediately, twisting, trying to throw her off. His strength was still enormous. Even compromised, even off balance, he was dangerous. He reached back, trying to grab her arm, but the angle was wrong. His own body got in the way. His flexibility limits, which had meant nothing earlier, mattered now. Eliminate, he started. Elena increased the pressure slightly. Just enough, his voice cut off. Yield, she said low and calm. For him alone, he bucked hard, trying again to break free. Failed, His body wasn't responding the way he expected anymore. Too many small disruptions. Too many points of failure building on each other. His strength had nowhere clean to go. The more he struggled, the worse his position became. Elena adjusted, tightened, shifted her weight, always staying one step ahead of his movement. Yield, she repeated. This time, she added a little more pressure to the stress point. Not enough to break the plate, but enough to make it very clear that she could. Vorik froze. Not completely, but enough. His breathing hitched. His body tensed in a different way now. Not attack. Not dominance. Recognition for the first time in the fight. He understood exactly where he was and what she could do next. A flicker of color passed across the ridges of his neck plating. Then again, .2 sharp pulses. The Drethi signal for submission. Elena released him immediately. No hesitation. No extra pressure. No victory display. She rolled away and stood up in one smooth motion, hands open, non-threatening, stepping back to give him space. The fight was over. The silence hit harder than the impact had. IT wasn't just quiet, that IT was. Stunned, medical teams rushed in, surrounding Vorik, scanners already active, checking for structural damage. The readouts flashed across their devices. Stress fractures in outer plating, minor joint disruptions, elevated internal strain levels. Painful, disorienting, but not permanent. Nothing that wouldn't heal. Everything that would be remembered. Elena stood near the edge of the arena, breathing steady. Not untouched, but controlled. Her uniform was still intact. No visible injuries. No dramatic signs of struggle. To anyone who hadn't watched the last 5 minutes, she could have passed for someone who had just finished a routine training match. Up above, the audience was still frozen. Some cadets stared at their betting screens in disbelief as numbers collapsed, winnings disappeared, and assumptions turned into losses. Others stared at Elena. Not like before. Before, she had been background. Now she was something else. Something they did not understand. Instructor Kaler finally moved. He descended into the arena, each step measured, deliberate. His upper arms were still folded, but the lower ones were no longer working the display. They hung still at his sides. He stopped a few feet from Elena. All four of his eyes were fixed on her. Explain, he said. No angered, no praise, just demand. Elena met his gaze. He attacked, she said simply. I defended. He made mistakes. I used them. Kaler's eyes narrowed slightly. You were physically outmatched. Yes, sir. He had superior strength. Yes, sir. Superior durability. Yes, sir. Superior reach. Yes, sir. Kaler leaned forward slightly. Then explain how you won. Elena paused for half a second. Permission to speak freely, sir. One of his lower hands made a brief motion. Granted. Elena kept her voice even. Physical advantages matter, she said. But they don't decide everything. Combat is about decisions under pressure. About reading patterns. About adapting faster than the other person. Those aren't physical traits. She let that sit for a moment, then added, I spent 4 minutes learning how he fights. He spent 4 minutes assuming he'd already won. The words landed harder than any strike had. Around them, cadets shifted, some uncomfortable, some thoughtful, some suddenly very quiet. Kaler studied her. You're saying you won because you were more intelligent. Elena shook her head slightly. I'm saying I won because I was willing to use it. A small difference, that a very important one. Up behind them, Vorik was being helped to sit up. He wasn't speaking, that he was listening. And for the first time since the match began, there was no certainty left in him. Only understanding. The shift didn't happen overnight. Institutions like the Obsidian Rift War Academy didn't change quickly. They were built on tradition, reinforced by success, and protected by people who had spent their entire lives believing the system worked exactly as it should. But cracks had formed. And cracks didn't need permission to spread at AT first. It was small things, that a few instructors adjusting how they evaluated combat drills. Less focus on raw output. More attention to decision-making. Cadets who had once relied purely on strength started asking different questions. Why did that work? Why did that fail? Did I miss? The questions mattered, because once someone started asking them, they couldn't go back to not asking. Vorik changed too. Not visibly, not in ways that would show up on performance charts immediately. He still trained harder than almost anyone else, still dominated in strength-based exercises, still moved with the same physical authority that had made him the top-ranked cadet. But something fundamental had shifted. He no longer assumed that he studied. During sparring, he paid attention to things he had ignored before. Foot placement, timing gaps, reactions to pressure. When an opponent hesitated, when they committed too early, when they believed something that wasn't true. And sometimes during controlled sessions, he trained with Elena, not as an opponent, as a problem to solve. Again, he would say, Elena would change something small at a different angle, at a different entry, at a different timing. And suddenly, what had worked before did not at first. It frustrated him. Then it interested him. Then it changed him. You don't fight the same way twice, he said once, after a session where she had countered him 3 different ways in under a minute. Elena shrugged. You shouldn't either. Vora considered that, then nodded. That was how learning happened. Not through defeat alone. Through understanding why defeat happened. Across the academy, human cadets felt the difference. They were still watched, still measured, still held to standards that weren't built for them. But now, they were also respected, carefully, reluctantly, but undeniably. Requests came in from other cadets, from instructors, from analysis teams. How did you read that pattern? How did you decide when to move in? How do you know where to strike when nothing looks weak? The answers were rarely simple, because human combat doctrine wasn't built on a single rule. That IT was built on flexibility, on the idea that no situation stayed the same, on the belief that if something didn't work, you changed it until it did. Some species adapted quickly. They adjusted their training, integrated new concepts, combined their natural advantages with human-style adaptability. They became better. Others resisted. They called it inefficient, unstructured, unreliable. They preferred clean systems, predictable outcomes, clear hierarchies. They learned more slowly, usually the hard way. Far beyond the academy, the pack continued its long war. The enemy didn't behave like anything the original doctrine had been built for. They didn't respect formations, didn't follow expected patterns, didn't collapse when faced with superior force. They adapted constantly. That had always been the problem. Now it was becoming the solution. Small changes at first, field commanders experimenting, adjusting tactics, breaking from standard engagement patterns, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding. Then succeeding more often, reports began to shift, not dramatically, not enough to declare victory, but enough to notice, enough to matter. Back at the academy, Elena completed her training cycle. Top marks, not in raw strength, not in endurance metrics, but in tactical assessment, adaptive response, combat decision-making under pressure, categories that hadn't carried much weight before, categories that now matter more than anyone wanted to admit. That on the day of her final evaluation, she stood in the same arena where everything had started, same floor, same walls, same quiet hum of the shield system, different atmosphere. This time, no one expected her to fail. That changed everything, because expectations didn't just shape how others saw you. They shaped how you were challenged. Her opponent was stronger, faster, smarter than Vorik had been that day. More careful, more aware, more prepared. And that was good, because Elena had never wanted easy fights. Easy fights didn't teach you anything. After the match, as she stepped away from the arena for the last time as a cadet, Kaler approached her. He studied her the same way he had on that first day. But his tone was different now. You've changed the way this academy. Thanks, he said. Elena shook her head. No, sir. She glanced back at the arena. You just finally started paying attention. Kaler held her gaze for a moment, then, slowly, nodded. Perhaps, he said. Elena left the academy shortly after, assigned to active operations. Real missions, real stakes, real consequences. Out there, nothing cared about rank, nothing cared about reputation, nothing cared about what someone should be able to do, only what they actually did. And out there, Elena did exactly what she had always done. She watched. She adapted. She refused to lose just because she was supposed to. The pact learned, slowly, painfully, but it learned that strength mattered. But it wasn't enough. that durability mattered, but it wasn't decisive, that the most dangerous opponent wasn't always the biggest or the fastest or the most heavily armed. Sometimes, it was the one who had spent their entire existence learning how to win without those things. The Academy updated its doctrine again. More openly this time. Not buried. Not hidden, but a clear addition to its core philosophy. Combat is not decided by what you are. Given.it is decided by what you do with it. Cadets read it. Some understood immediately. Others didn't. They would eventually, because the lesson didn't stay in classrooms. That IT showed up in arenas. In simulations. In real battles. And when it did, it was always the same. Someone underestimated human, and then learned very clearly why that was a mistake.